What do you get when you put the Loch-n-Load into the crazy game mode called Mannpower? The answer is kinda all over the place. Today I'm going to answer this question, along with how you can use this weapon effectively in this mode. Mannpower is a game mode that subverts the expectations of TF2 by introducing game-altering perks and abilities that change each class's playstyles and roles. So first we have to set a baseline, how the weapon functions in normal TF2. The Loch-n-Load fires faster pills, which go at a longer range, with the negative downside that you have one less pill in your clip. The downside is stacked with the fact that your pills break on the walls and the ground, making rollers non-existent. The second upside is that buildings take more damage. When using this in normal TF2, players have to really aim their shots in order to get the most out of the Loch-n-Load, usually having to use stickies as a further source of damage output. Though this is what you'd usually expect from Loch-n-Load gameplay, when we use it in Mannpower, things change up a bit. Bear in mind this game mode is meant to flip the table of what's normal in TF2. With that said, a lot of the classes, strats, weapons, etc. are shaken so much that the meta literally turns on its head. I find this to be an extremely good thing, because it gives a completely fresh way to play my favorite game. Mannpower has 3 common themes that make up the majority of the mode, so we're going to place the Loch-n-Load in each of these 3 categories to see what happens. When you look at TF2 hard enough, you'll notice a lot of the fighting happens on the ground, almost as if the game's played on a 2D board. Well, if this is the case, Mannpower adds an additional third dimension to TF2's gameplay. This is because of one valuable tool, the Grappling Hook. This nifty little thing is a utility that grants any class greater mobility by allowing you to zip across the map in any direction you want. So how does the Loch-n-Load play into this? Well, for one, the boosted speed of your pills makes it far easier to hit aerial shots, therefore more useful in this mode. This one strat is what sells the Loch-n-Load for me. There's a really clean feeling of landing a well-timed shot when it takes place in the sky above you. In a mode where players are flying in the air, it's almost essential to use a weapon that plays to that strength. This is why the Loch-n-Load is appealing in my eyes. Not to mention, you yourself have a grapple too. By jumping in the air, you not only make yourself a harder target to hit, but you oddly have an easier time landing shots. In the moment where I need to not only dodge incoming fire, but deal out some punishment too, grappling is the stone that kills both those birds. This third dimension gameplay means that it takes additional skill and practice to learn how to function in this mode, but that also means it's far more rewarding when you get used to it. If there's one thing I love about the Loch-n-Load in Mannpower, it's the slick ability to hit flying enemies at a long range. It really pays off to practice this weapon for that reason. The grapple is cool, but the things that really make Mannpower a crazy mode are the power-ups. Essentially, they're items that you pick up which passively buff you in a special way. There's 12 of them, so I'm gonna quickly go over how each of them affect the Loch-n-Load. Strength is by far my personal favorite when using this weapon. It multiplies your damage by 2, so when your pills normally hit for 100, now they deal 200. This one buff makes the Loch-n-Load insanely good to use. Let me put it like this. In this mode, sometimes you'll need to snipe people from a far distance, especially when you're fighting a team using revenge crits, which will be discussed later. What the Loch-n-Load does in this case is increase your effective range, which allows you to pick off farther players, and with Strength's additional damage, you can one-shot almost all the 9 classes. Since buildings already take more damage, you can also kill a level 3 sentry with just 1 pill. I can't say enough how absurdly good this is to play with. There's nothing like shooting a pill into the sky, waiting a couple precious seconds to see where it lands, and witnessing a soldier from 100 feet away get the killing blow. Strength makes you really good in just about any situation. It helps defend, it helps you push, it gives you an easier time fighting other power-up users, and it makes getting away much cleaner. Additionally, Strength is a direct counter to many of the upcoming power-ups. If you're good at aiming, then for the love of all goodness, please try out Strength because it makes for such a fun experience. I give this a 10 out of 10. Haste is the next power-up on our list. You know how the downside of the Loch-n-Load is less pills to fire? Well, Haste is one of the power-ups that give you that back. With Haste, you now fire 6 pills at a time, and the reloading speed is stupidly fast, meaning you'll always be able to deal out damage. It's a bit tricky to aim when you're spamming pills, so I find heavies and sentries are the best to fire at when using Haste. It makes taking out sentry nests a breeze, and if you're being chased by a group of enemies, your spam will shred them up in seconds. I find a lot of people hold Haste as their favorite power-up, and I certainly see where they're coming from. It effectively turns your Loch-n-Load into a makeshift airstrike, just without the negative downsides. Though it's fun to use in the right situations, I'll pick Strength over Haste because of its raw instant damage that I find more often I need to use. This is an 8 out of 10. As a demo man, the only way you can boost your health normally is by utilizing the shields, right? Well, with power-ups involved, that's all about the change. The Keen power-up gives you 100 bonus HP, along with a healing factor. When you've got more health to spare, you're allowed to shove yourself deeper into enemy lines because you can take more damage. I know that the Loch-n-Load specializes in long-range combat, but it's just as effective when you have to face your adversaries 10 feet away. Sometimes you're forced to fight within the confines of a room or choke point. It makes more sense, therefore, to use a power-up like Keen, which makes you a tougher class to kill. I cannot count how many times Keen has saved my life in situations where I otherwise would have died. On the other hand, if your enemy is using Keen, don't worry, you still have a chance. To counter a Keen user with a Loch-n-Load, either land consistent shots, use a power-up that increases your damage, or back away while still firing. 7 out of 10. Vampire is similar in the fact that it heals you, except instead of it being passive, you get your healing by dealing damage. The bright side of this is that you can heal yourself much quicker for doing what you're supposed to do, shooting at the enemy. In addition, it gives you 80 HP, and makes you 25% more resistant to damage, so charging into a crowd and going for more aggressive plays becomes more of a viable tactic. I love using Vampire against a cocky heavy that thinks he has the upper hand. I simply dish out my 3 pills as he helplessly watches me heal, and I come out on top. The additional damage against buildings means that you have even more health when you fire against a sentry. Vampire is also one of the other power-ups that gives you more shots to fire, yet again taking out the Loch-n-Load's major downside. Now when you fire against a Vampire user, be careful, because that damage resistance means you're only going to deal 75 per shot. It's best to fight a Vampire user from a far distance, so that their chance of spotting you and landing shots on you decreases drastically. Luckily, the Loch-n-Load is good at just that, so take advantage of your increased range to safely deal with a Vampire user. I give this an 8 out of 10. The healing doesn't stop there. Regeneration, also known as Regen, replenishes your health at wicked high speeds. Regen is good for one-on-one interactions, along with taking spam from a far distance away. It fills both your health and your ammo, so you don't have to worry about being near a health pack when fighting. On the contrary, if you fight someone who's using Regen, you'll have to land consistent shots, and I mean you really have to hit your shots. If you're not confident you'll land 2 to 3 consecutive pipes, it's a good idea to retreat and find another way to deal with them. You'll come out alive, and you can then find a power-up that helps you fight this kind of healing. Strength. That being said, I give Regen a 6 out of 10 because the only real perk you get is the healing, which other power-ups already give, along with additional bonuses. Resistance is a power-up that may not heal you, but it does grant you 50% damage resistance and immunity to things like backstabs, reflect damage, and plague effect. Basically, any damage you take is divided by 2. Yet again, we have another power-up that makes you more of an aggressive class because of the boost in effective health. When you're the one fighting a resistance user, just keep in mind that they basically have double health, so now you have to put out a double amount of damage. I give Resistance a 7 out of 10 because it's really good for anti-BS. It stops you from getting one shot in most cases too, but I still like damage output power-ups more. Plague is, well, not an awfully good power to use with the Loch-n-Load. What it does is snag health packs from a distance, and if you touch an enemy, they'll die in 10 seconds if they don't get a health pack. The problem is that if you're using the Loch-n-Load, you don't exactly have the mindset of getting in enemies' faces, especially with the fact that you take damage from your own splash. Trying to get people plagued not only puts you in danger, but goes against the long-range style the Loch-n-Load is trying to offer. I guess you can still use Plague to grab health packs, and if you get the jump on a player and bump into them, you'll probably get away with it too. But this is the kind of power-up you only use when you don't have any alternatives. 4 out of 10. Precision is the last power-up that gives you your pills back, and that's about it. This power-up is better suited for other weapons and classes. Nothing else is notable about this power-up for the Loch-n-Load, except for the fact that it boosts your projectile speed, but since the Loch-n-Load already does that, we could be better using our power-up slot for alternative buffs that give an even greater return. 1 out of 10. Moving on. Reflect is debatably a broken kind of power-up. It not only takes your HP to 400, but 80% of that damage you take gets fired back at the enemy as reflected damage. This basically makes you into a scary boogeyman with high damage potential. Imagine a soldier fires a rocket, gets shot up in the air by sheer magic, to which you then follow up with an air shot. That's basically the experience you get when using Reflect. Does this make you a powerful foe to fight against? Of course, and if you're good at flicking your air shots, you can combo Reflex Knockback and land a cool shot. Now, if you fight a Reflect user, you'll have to take your shots from a far distance. That's pretty obvious. But again, the Loch-n-Load shines in this moment. You'll be taking damage, so you'll want a constant healing source. Either medics, dispensers, health packs, or healing power-ups work. Resistance and Vampire are straight up immune to the Reflect effect, so if you find that, then you're all good to go. Reflect gets a 7 out of 10 for being scary, but it's just not a personal preference. Agility is one of those other power-ups that are better suited on other classes. It gives you much higher speeds, both running and grappling, but that also makes it harder to shoot your pills. I suppose if you master the art of firing pills while going at Mach 5, this power-up basically makes you an unhittable foe. That's basically the only stat worth mentioning, but yet again, we have a power-up that just isn't right for this weapon. 3 out of 10. Let's continue. Supernova is special because it doesn't give you any buff at the start. Instead, you have to charge a meter by dealing damage, or wait for it to fill up on its own. When charged, all you have to do is right-click with your grapple out, and you stun the enemy while also removing their power-up. I'd say this certainly makes aiming your Loch-n-Load easy as pie, since you literally turn your foe into a sitting duck. Now, Nova is kinda redundant because I find other power-ups way more useful and immediate. On top of that, you get no apparent change while using Nova until you actually charge that meter, essentially wasting your one power slot for a period of time. 2 out of 10. The last power-up on our list is Knockout, and it's very underwhelming in this case because it forces you to use your melee. It's good with other weapons, but this video is about the Loch-n-Load. A power-up that removes your ability to use the Loch-n-Load certainly isn't going to help your long-range tactics. 0 out of 10 because this power-up simply cannot apply. Now then, we've talked about the grapple and the power-ups, but one of the highest sources of damage in Mannpower is something called Revenge Crits. This is the final category of our weapon review. Revenge Crits is a perk that spawns whenever your team gets killed too much. It stays in your spawn for 2 minutes, and if you pick it up, you get full crits for 20 seconds at a time. The Loch-n-Load already deals some pretty good damage. Just hitting 2 pipes already kills 8 of the 9 classes, but with Revenge Crits, it just goes insane from there. When you pair Revenge Crits with the Loch-n-Load, you essentially expand your pill's effect to the fullest extent your splash will allow. You not only kill whatever poor soul you land your pipe on, but do massive damage to any other players next to them. It just feels gross, and I mean a good gross, to shoot at a turtled sentry with crits and watch the kill feed fill up entirely with my mayhem. Revenge Crits are a great utility for the Loch-n-Load especially, because your air shot ability means players have to respect your radius all the time. Grappling in the air is usually the best way to dodge incoming fire, but the Loch-n-Load makes it easy to combat that, meaning the enemy has less options to deal with you directly. Power-ups additionally stack with crits, so you're even stronger than before. Haste, for example, already gives higher DPS with its spam, but crits make that damage ramp up way higher. The feeling of landing a crit on 3 players at the same time is exhilarating. It's important to get good with the Loch-n-Load for this reason, because as soon as you start hitting those crit pipes, you become a lethal killing machine. Revenge Crits get a solid 10 out of 10 for sheer kill gluttony and fun. So that pretty much sums up the Loch-n-Load and Mannpower. I know this is an alternate game mode, but it offers experiences like this, where you can turn your favorite weapons into something else. It gives an extremely fresh spin to everything we're used to in TF2, and that's exactly why I talk about it, so that you can all understand why. With that said, please like the video and subscribe if you enjoy this content. Type in the comments what weapon you'd like to see next. I still read each and every single one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you around.